But anyway, James, we connected because you saw one of my testimonies discussing Santeria, and you reached out to me because what you're doing is you're interviewing people who have been involved in Santeria and people who have left Santeria for your dissertation. Am I correct?
That is correct.
That is super interesting.
Yes, sir. I'm a PhD student at Grand Canyon University, which is in Phoenix, and I live in Chicago. I'm a remote learner. And I am, yes, doing a study on people who left Santeria and other variants of what's known as Yoruba religion, because that's where Santeria originates. It's really known within the Latino community. It's called Santeria as well as some other names, but it all comes from a religion that originates in West Africa, in Nigeria, to be precise, amongst the Yoruba people.
Cool. So explain that a little bit to us, because there's people on here who are like, what the heck is a Santeria? What's Yoruba? What's that? So explain to us, what is Santeria? And then how does that tie back to, Yoruba spirituality?
Yeah. So Santeria, in short, it's a word that basically means worship of the saints or saint veneration. And it got its start in a very, very simple way, a result of the slave trade. So when enslaved members of the Yoruba tribe were taken captive and brought overseas, they were brought to different parts of the New World, into Cuba, into other islands in the Caribbean, into Brazil, and they brought their religion with them. Now, what a lot of people don't know, the Yoruba tribe in Nigeria, it's a very old tribe. They say the records go back 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 years. Some people say 8,000 years, although it might be an exaggeration. But we do know it goes back a very, very long time. And in addition, the Yoruba people were known as scholars, as philosophers, and their religious practices and their culture became systematized over a number of years. It was practiced en masse amongst the tribal elders and the various members of the tribe. And so when slaves were taken captive, they were brought to the New World. They brought the Yoruba religious practices. But the problem was, the slave owners didn't really understand what they were doing, and they didn't really like it. They saw it as some form of sedition and things like that. So what the Yoruba descendants began to do was to take their indigenous native practices and combine them with the religions of the slave owners. So in Cuba, that became combined with Catholicism. And so the name Santeria got its origin because these Yoruba practitioners were taking some of the deities in their traditional religion and putting them and associating them with saints in the Catholic Church. So you may have a saint for this, and they equate that to an Orisha from the Yoruba tradition to that. So that's where the name comes from. In essence, it's a West African religion. It's a very old religion, and it's religion that has a lot of it's well researched, but it's mostly oral. Like, for example, most people don't know that the Yoruba religion has its own scripture called the Odu Ifa. And some branches of the religion in Santeria and other countries, people don't really engage with it, but it's a very old religion that has a lot of scripture in it, practices, rituals, things that are given word of mouth. And in my opinion, a lot of things that makes it very easy for people to get involved because it's a very hands-on religion, right? You're out there, you can call it a form of animism, like spirit worship of the earth, pantheism, and things like that. So part of what people, when they get attracted to the religion, they start to think about the Orisha. Okay, so the Orisha are you can call them spirits. Some people say they're angels. I don't think so. But they're spirits of various types. And they represent different forces of nature. And they're given a name, a human form with certain characteristics. And they say every person has an Orisha that owns their head. So, for example, when I was in the religion, they said that my Orisha who guarded my head was Ochosi, who's a hunter, who is a strategist, who's a visionary, and things like that. Some people have a more feminine Orisha, like Yemaya, who is supposed to be the Orisha of the ocean, and so it's nurturing. Some people have an Orisha called Oshun, who's the Orisha of the river, and she's meant to be sweet, but also powerful, and ultra feminine. But to answer your question and circle back to it, when the Yoruba religion came to the New World, it got intertwined with various local practices like Catholicism, People who went to Trinidad, they got more involved, not so much in the Catholic Church, but more in the Baptist Church. So down there, they call it either Shango or Shango Baptist or Spiritual Baptist. In Brazil, they went in different directions. They call it either Umbanda or Candomblé and things like that. But it all goes back to the Yoruba practices that are still being practiced today in West Africa. And finally, within the Latino community, people refer to it in different types of ways, and there's different practices. So you have Santeria, which is the more Catholic side of it, where you pray to saints, but you do it all in the Yoruba way. And then you have what they call Lukumi, which is taking out all the Catholicism and just dealing with the Orisha themselves. And then you have another branch of it, which is the branch that I was a part of, called Ifa. And Ifa is the branch that deals specifically with the practice of divination and giving advice and counsel and learning how to help people through the practice of sacrifice and things like that. It's a very hands-on religion. It's a very community-oriented religion. You got to be part of a group. They call them houses, either iles or egbeis and things like that. It's very hands-on. It's very community-driven. And you'll find, if you get involved in it, a lot of good people are in it in terms of what you might call a good person. So stable, friendly, open-hearted with things, willing to give you your last dime sort of thing. So it's a very, very big community-oriented religion that, in essence, gets people trapped in, from my perspective, because of a couple reasons. Number one, because everyone who finds it, either you grow up with it, which is not that uncommon, believe it or not. There's people who do grow up with it. But most of the time, you have people who are looking for an answer in some way, right? Looking for an answer, whether there's something going on in their work or their relationships or their health or their children, education. And for me, it was all the above. I was looking for answers. And I was exposed to it because ultimately I was looking into voodoo, thinking about my Louisiana heritage at one point, things like that. I grew up in a church, by the way. Got born again when I was a teenager, but I got off the path and started looking for things, searching. And so over the years, I would keep circling back to voodoo. And so I got exposed to Santeria, to Yoruba religion, while I was looking for voodoo, because a lot of people think they're the same, but they're not. The spiritual genesis of it, as a word, they come from different tribes in West Africa, different countries. There are some similarities with the deities, but they're not. Because if you try to do something in one religion, it's not recognized in another. And I do call it a religion. And the reason why is that you have millions of people around the world who practice various forms of it. Some estimates 50, 60 million. Probably 5 million, at least, easy in the United States alone. And that's at a very high level. It's not talking about people who maybe go looking for a remedy or something when things get bad, but who don't practice it, right? Like in any Latino community, you can find any number of botanicas on the street, where they might do herbs and limpias, like cleansing and things like that. It's a big part of the Latino community, and millions of people practice it. And many people go to it looking for an answer, many of whom are Christians and of other religious orientations, even atheists. Like I've seen people walk into the shop where the elder under whom I sat, we call him an elder because there's a hierarchy in the religion. And that's part of the problem, I should say, as well, because you end up pedestalizing a person and you start to question your own judgment and the spiritual giftings that the Father has given you to engage in discernment, right? But you have an elder, you have someone that takes you under his wing, and he gets to know you, you get to know him. You might do acts of service. In my case, I got involved in a temple here in Chicago, and my journey got sort of entangled with my elders for a number of years because he had goals, right? He was trying to grow his temple. He had things in his life that he was working out. And so basically, to make a long story short, people find this religion looking for something. And I'll tell you, you might find something that you think you're searching there, but there's always another side of the coin, and it has to do with the nature of spirits and how these spirits operate. So I'll pause for a second and let you guys ask you some questions before.
Thanks so much for watching that clip. If you want to see the full episode, click right here. God bless.